The music was soft, the kind that fills in silence without interrupting it. Wind moved the hanging lights strung between the trees, and the clinking of wine glasses blended with laughter, hers especially. Marina's laugh had changed, sharper, like she was trying to prove something. She wore that red silk dress she used to save for our anniversaries. Tonight, it belonged to the room. I was 3 steps from her when he showed up, the kind of man who arrives like he's done us all a favor. Perfect tan, white teeth, buttoned down, unbuttoned, just enough to signal the gym membership in the boat. She spotted him before he even made it to the drinks table. Her body turned toward his like a compass, and I saw the shift, the light in her eyes that used to be for me. Now it was for him. I held out the glass of wine I'd poured for her. She didn't even glance at it. "Mark, this is David," she said, like I was a stranger interrupting. Her fingers had already found Mark's arm. "David, this is Mark. He's in commercial real estate." He didn't look at me. Not really. Just gave that quick appraisal men give each other when one's already decided he's won. And then he pulled out his wallet. It wasn't rushed. He took his time, like this was a move he'd rehearsed before. He slid a crisp dollar bill out and placed it on the table between us. Not toward me, not for me. Just there, like a tip left for a bartender who'd outstayed his welcome. "I'll take good care of her tonight," he said, smiling like this was all some casual transaction. Then he turned back to her, and she laughed. God, she laughed. I didn't say a word. I didn't look at her again. I didn't even touch the dollar. I just turned and walked away, the clink of their glasses behind me sounding like a closing door. If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. The walk to the car felt longer than it was. I heard my name once, faint, more obligation than concern. I didn't stop. I drove home with the windows down, the cool night wind cutting through my chest like it was trying to keep me awake. The driveway was empty. Her perfume was still on my skin, and I hated how I noticed it. I stood in the kitchen for a while, staring at nothing. No anger, no yelling, just a slow descent into something colder. There's a kind of clarity that comes with humiliation. A line had been crossed, and the worst part wasn't even her betrayal. It was how proud she seemed of it. Upstairs, the bedroom light was still on from earlier. She'd left her earrings in the sink, her phone charger coiled neatly beside the bed like she planned to come home. But I already knew she wouldn't. Not tonight, maybe not again, in the same way. I sat at my desk and powered on the computer, not because I had a plan yet, but because I knew I would. The screen lit my face, reflected in the dark glass of the window behind it. I didn't recognize the expression I saw there, but it wasn't weak. And downstairs, still untouched on the counter where I emptied my pockets, the dollar waited, the garage door grown closed behind me like it was sealing something in. I sat in the car for a minute longer, letting the engine tick itself cool while the silence settled, the same silence that used to mean peace. Now it felt like a verdict. Her shoes were still by the door, one heel knocked over like she'd rushed while getting ready. The faint smell of her perfume, orange blossom and something sweeter, hung in the hallway, as if mocking me for being the one who came home alone. I didn't call her, I didn't text. I already knew where she was, and I had no interest in confirming it. The living room was untouched, throw pillows perfect, her laptop closed, phone charger gone. I noticed the little things, the ones that scream louder than words. The kind of noticing that happens after something breaks and you're just cataloging the damage. I didn't wander, I didn't drink. I sat at my desk. The login page loaded slowly, or maybe it just felt that way. I typed our shared credentials from memory, no hesitation, joint checking, savings, brokerage, a retirement account we hadn't talked about in months. I opened each one and started the capture. Screenshots, multiple angles, balance summaries, recent transactions. I exported CSVs and named each file by date and timestamp. I archived them to a drive she didn't know existed. The folder was already labeled. I had made it a long time ago, back when I thought being prepared made me paranoid. Now I understood. It made me sane. Next, I logged into the bank's back-end settings. Requested a freeze on the secondary card, not closed, just paused. No alert would be sent. If she tried to book a spa or buy a new suitcase, she'd assume it was a glitch. My fingers hesitated once, just once, before opening the older directory. Buried under work contracts and encrypted archives, the folder titled Kronos Asset Recovery Dormant Entities waited like a weapon I'd hidden and hoped I'd never need. It wasn't a shell company, it was more like a skeleton key. Inside, documents I hadn't opened in 6 years, PDFs, notarized filings, a sealed trust structure, one named beneficiary, me, 2 silent partners, both long out of the picture, and one clause I remembered even without rereading it. Funds transferred in via specific pathways became immune to marital claim if dormant longer than 36 months. It had been 42. She had no idea Kronos still existed. It was the kind of name you forget unless you're looking for it, and she never looked too closely. Her world was built on trust and noise. Mine had always been built on backup plans and quiet bookmarks. I drafted a simple internal memo, just a note to myself. Begin phased repositioning, target Q4, trigger, breach confirmed. I saved it, encrypted the folder again, and leaned back. The house creaked as the day cooled. Her absence wasn't loud. It was surgical, a clean cut with no anesthetic. I didn't rehearse a confrontation. I didn't replay her laugh or the way she leaned into him. That part was already dead to me. What mattered now was what lived behind the firewall she never asked about, what waited in the shadows of old agreements and buried protections. I turned off the light, left the room, and closed the door like sealing a vault. From now on, I'd treat every detail like a transaction, because love can vanish, but control, that's something you can prepare for. The third morning after the party, I parked in front of a florist that smelled like crushed stems and water that had been sitting too long in glass. I wasn't there for roses. Above it, a narrow staircase led to a door with no name, just a gold number and a keypad. I rang the buzzer, gave my name, and waited. The office was colder than I expected. Gray carpet, one ficus, and a front desk with no receptionist. Carla Menken opened the door herself. Sharp blazer, hair tied back, no small talk, just a glance, and then, "You brought documents?" I nodded, unzipped the leather folio, and handed them over. Joint accounts, property titles, old business filings, a full printout of the Kronos trust structure. She didn't sit right away. She read as she stood, flipping with practiced speed, her brow furrowed at page 7. She signed a power of attorney clause disguised in an estate doc, she said, half smiling. She did. When? 2 nights ago. Carla finally sat. And she hasn't read it? She didn't look past the cover page. Convenient, she said, but not for her? The hum of the printer filled the room for a moment. She was already duplicating the originals. I watched her file each set into folders labeled with colored tabs, blue for financials, green for legal strategy, red for alerts. "I don't want revenge," I said. "This isn't about ruining her." She paused, looked up. You want clarity, options, insulation, leverage." I nodded. "And timing." "Then you came to the right place." She reached under her desk and pulled out a slim, locked portfolio, a list of staging points, lawyers, notaries, account managers, and flag triggers. One name stood out, Candima Security and Compliance, based in the Maldives. "She said they're flying out next week," I offered. "First class, his treat." Carla tapped the folder. "They'll trigger 2 alerts the moment their names hit the arrival log at Mail International. One for flag transfers, one for identity confirmation due to pending civil holds." "You're saying we can freeze them while they're in the air?" She nodded. "They'll land into a wall, but we won't start the clock until the last wire clears." "She won't see it coming," I murmured. "She's not supposed to," Carla said, with a faint smile. "Not until she's mid-flight." We went over the mechanisms. I signed a few authorizations. Nothing loud, nothing that raised alarms. Everything funneled through old entities, protected structures, legacy rules she'd never cared about when things felt safe. Outside, I could hear the florist clipping stems below. Carla slid a printed schedule across the desk. "This is the countdown. The moment she boards, I'll push the final notice. You won't need to do anything after that." I looked over the paper, read every line twice, then tucked it into my bag without a word. It was surgical, quiet, legal. As I stepped back out into the street, the sun caught the edge of a bus stop at showing a couple clinking wine glasses by the sea. Her dress was red, his shirt was unbuttoned. The image made my jaw tighten, but only for a second. That trip would be the last thing she'd ever accept on someone else's dime, and she'd have no idea who paid for the fallout. She floated through the house like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome, but knew no one would ask her to leave. 2 weeks of late arrivals, new bags, new makeup, tan lines forming even though we hadn't been anywhere together. I stopped asking. That part was easy. The first night she didn't come home at all, she texted at 2:03 a.m., crashing at a friend's. Don't wait up. No name, no explanation. She used to send long messages. Now she didn't waste the words. I didn't reply. I just logged the time. Each morning she drifted back in like she hadn't left. Coffee from somewhere expensive, her laughter too bright when she answered calls on speakerphone, slipping into the kitchen and out of reach before I could even pretend to ask where she'd been. I didn't try. Silence had become my currency. While she spun her story, I was shifting ours. I started with the main account, pulled 22,000 into a legacy entity, then transferred that into Kronos through a proxy in Oregon. From there, a staggered redirection every 48 hours. It moved like vapor, legal, invisible, irreversible. Next, the house. I scheduled an appraisal for a potential refi, then signed an option agreement through a private buyer I'd once helped settle a zoning case. The clause? It could be triggered remotely if the other party vacated the residence for more than 72 hours without written notice. She'd already met the condition twice. Then came the vacation fund. We'd always kept a small joint account named Dream Escape, set up years ago when we were still planning futures. That account fed into a modest brokerage, mostly safe investments, until now. I liquidated the contents, masked the movement through 2 temporary donor accounts, and reconstituted the full amount into a legal education trust for a fictional minor nephew residing in Maine. The paperwork? Bulletproof. She never looked twice. She was busy shopping for swimsuits online, tabs open to overwater bungalows and luxury spas. I watched the browser history pile up on the shared desktop. She never cleared it. She never thought she'd need to. One afternoon, as she walked in wearing a new sundress and holding 2 guidebooks, she looked straight through me like I was furniture. "Just a little break," she said, distracted, flipping a page. "Mark's taking me to the Maldives. His treat." I dried my hands on a towel and leaned against the counter. "Enjoy it," I said. She smiled without really seeing me. "I plan to." Later that night, I found the passport holder she'd left on the dresser, still in the shopping bag. She'd picked the one with gold trim and a matching luggage tag. I held it for a second, then placed it back exactly as she'd left it. No changes, just cataloging the final details. The days passed like a slow leak in something once sealed tight. She came and went. The refrigerator stayed full, but nothing was shared. No questions, no blame. Just air moving through a house now half abandoned in spirit. At night, I tracked the transactions, timed the shifts, adjusted the triggers. Carla and I exchanged brief, emotionless updates. The staging was nearly complete. The woman in my house was already gone. Only her shadow remained, and I'd already started folding that shadow into the paperwork. She slid the folder across the counter like it was nothing, between sips of her smoothie and a call she was half listening to on her AirPods. "Hey, can you sign this real quick?" she said, barely looking at me. "Just some investment stuff I forgot to move before the trip. Stupid admin things, you know." I looked down. Cream-colored paper. Tabbed. Slightly too thick for a casual request. I didn't touch it right away. She was already back to her call, laughing lightly. "Yeah, just wrapping up a few boring things. No, he's cool with it. Totally chill." Cool. Chill. Funny, the word she used now to describe me. I wasn't either. She turned her back as I opened the folder. I flipped past the cover letter. Boilerplate. Something about realigning jointly held assets to streamline our estate. Page 2 had legal language I recognized instantly, not because I read it now, but because I remembered it. We'd used the same format years ago when drafting shared power documents during a mortgage refi. It was standard, but only if you paid attention, and on page 4, buried halfway down under a generic heading, Beneficiary Realignment and Simplification, was the clause. Durable power of attorney, effective upon signature, no expiration unless revoked. full discretion over all investment realignments, disbursements, and asset repositioning. It was almost elegant how they'd buried it. I flipped back to the cover page and saw her handwriting in blue ink beside a sticky note. Sign here. I looked over at her. She was in the other room now, tapping through outfits on her phone, holding one dress up to the mirror, the red one again. I signed, clean strokes, no hesitation. Then I closed the folder, stood, and walked it into the room. Here, I said simply, offering it back. She glanced up and smiled as she took it. Thanks, babe. Knew you wouldn't mind. Then, without a pause, she leaned forward and kissed my cheek. A soft, automatic thing, like brushing crumbs from a table. She turned away again, back into her world. I stood there for another second watching her scroll. She didn't ask what I'd seen. She didn't even ask if I read it, 'cause she assumed I never would, that I was still the man she could outpace, outmaneuver, outlaugh. I walked upstairs, slow and quiet. In my office, I logged the document number into Carla's system, then I tagged it. Authority transfer acquired, voluntary, no dispute expected. Final prep took less than 20 minutes. By then, she was in the shower, humming, and downstairs on the kitchen counter, still warm from the sun through the windows, sat the folder she thought would save her the hassle of paperwork. She had no idea it was the last thing she'd ever sign in this house with my name on it. The sky outside was still bruised with early gray when the first vibration buzzed against the wood nightstand. I didn't jump for it, just opened my eyes, let them adjust to the light leaking through the blinds. 6:17 a.m., the same time she used to get up for yoga class, back when her life still included me. I reached for the phone, already knowing what I'd see. Transfer complete. Freeze activated. Notification issued to airport security. Candima. I sat up slowly, the sheets still warm from my body. No one on her side. She'd left an hour earlier, the soft roll of her suitcase down the hallway, a muted little celebration she didn't think I heard. I had listened without moving. Even the front door sounded smug when it shut behind her. Downstairs, I brewed coffee. No radio, no morning news, just the hiss of the machine and the weight of silence. This time, not suffocating, just clean. At 7:40, I logged into the system again. The triggers were running clean. Transfers had executed in staggered intervals overnight, funneled through entities Kronos had absorbed like a slow-moving tide. Nothing criminal, nothing messy, just a legal wall dressed in policy language and compliance flags. 8:22, another buzz. Carla, security holding them at Mail International, funds flagged, names on alert. I exhaled once, long and slow. No follow-up, no instructions. It was done. Across the world, she was probably still in line, barefoot at the security checkpoint, arguing with someone in a blazer who didn't care how expensive her sandals were. She'd look at Mark, expecting him to fix it. He'd be staring at his phone, jaw tightening as the realization hit. The money wasn't going through. The hotel room she thought was waiting wouldn't be. The champagne boat ride she posted about in advance, can't wait for paradise, would sit empty. They wouldn't even get past the airport lounge. I took a sip of my coffee. It tasted exactly the same as it did yesterday, but something underneath it had shifted, like a silence that now obeyed me instead of threatening me. The last of the documents were already with Carla. The airport freeze was clean. No lawsuits, no drama. Just a flag. Fraudulent booking suspected due to last-minute wire discrepancies, flagged assets linked to questionable POA activity. All factual, all traceable. She wouldn't be arrested. That wasn't the point. She'd just be stopped. Her vacation, her fantasy, her whole smug performance, it had all counted on one thing, that I would stay the same, that I wouldn't notice, wouldn't act, wouldn't understand what she'd done with Mark, with the money, with her arrogance. But I noticed, and I acted, and now, somewhere between immigration and baggage claim, she was realizing that everything she'd banked on had evaporated in the time it took her to order a second mimosa on the plane. I rinsed the mug and placed it upside down in the rack. No need to hold on to anything anymore. Let the dominoes fall. I had all morning. The call came just after 8, the screen lighting up with her name while I was slicing into a lemon at the kitchen counter. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered. Hello. Her voice hit fast, sharp, frayed at the edges. David, they won't let us through. Something's wrong. They're saying there's an issue with the booking, and the hotel won't release the room. Then we tried to use the card, and nothing. The bank's flagging the transfer. Do you know anything about this? I could hear the background noise, muffled announcements, chatter, maybe the shuffling of people watching a scene unfold near the exit gates. She sounded breathless, not from heat, from panic. I walked to the sink and ran the lemon under water. Strange, I said calmly. Maybe ask the man who gave you $1. There was a pause, a real one, not a tactical silence. The kind that means someone's replaying something they thought they could forget. You did this, she said. The words landed slower now, accusation shrinking into realization. I leaned against the counter, flicked a seed from the cutting board. No, you did. I just finalized the paperwork. She didn't speak right away, and I didn't fill the silence. When she finally did, her voice had dropped an octave. You moved the money. You handed me power of attorney 3 days before your flight, remember? I kept my tone flat, factual. You labeled it just investment stuff. That wasn't, she stopped herself. Wasn't what? I asked. She breathed in hard. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I stayed quiet. Her voice cracked slightly, the polish unraveling. Mark says we should call someone. His guy, he's trying. I let that one sit. He's trying, she repeated, quieter this time. I'm sure he is. More silence. I imagined her in the arrivals terminal, pulled to the side while other tourists breezed past in sandals and linen. Mark probably pacing behind her, muttering into his phone. The kind of scene where no one wants to make eye contact, but everyone watches. Her voice was thin now, like she was talking from underwater. So what happens now? I looked out the window. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The neighbor's sprinklers kicked on. That's up to you, I said. David, please. I didn't answer. The call was still open, but the conversation was already over. After a few seconds, I heard her whisper something, but it wasn't for me. Then the line went dead. I set the phone face down on the table, finished slicing the lemon, and dropped it into the glass of water I'd been ignoring. Outside, the sky was turning that deep blue just before full dark, peaceful, steady. Across the world, the fantasy she'd been clinging to had split open, and now, for the first time, she was finally seeing what she'd built it on. The front door opened just after noon. No knock, no warning, just the sound of her keys hitting the floor, followed by her suitcase wheels dragging across the hardwood like dead weight. She stood there for a second, outlined by sunlight, but looking like she'd walked through something colder. She looked thinner. Not in body, her skin was still tanned, her hair still styled, but in the way people look when they've run out of story. Her mouth was tight. No makeup, no performance. She didn't speak until she reached the kitchen. Then came the sound, paper slamming against the marble countertop. Not loud, but final. A printed bank statement. 3 pages, highlighted in orange and red. Dates, transfers, balances, zeros. You moved everything, she said, not a question. I nodded once. Yes. Her hand shook as she pointed at the line item. Even the Maldives fund. Especially that one. You had no right, she started, then caught herself. I waited. Her eyes darted to mine, then away. How? You granted me legal authority, I said evenly. 3 days before takeoff. I have your signature. You labeled the file Estate Simplification. Her breath caught in her throat. I could see it, her running back over every line she hadn't read, every page she'd waved away. The arrogance of her rush now collapsing under the reality of ink and timestamp. It was just supposed to be fun, she whispered, voice cracking. It was supposed to be a break, something light. Costly fun, I murmured, but educational. She sat down at the edge of a stool like her knees were about to give. The silence in the room was clinical. I didn't offer her water. I didn't sit. Mark's gone, she said quietly. He disappeared in Dubai. His card didn't work. His phone disconnected the next day. I nodded again. They usually do. You knew this would happen, she said, eyes narrowing now, like anger might save her. You planned it. I prepared for it. I corrected. There's a difference. She looked back at the statement, her hands gripping the edges like she could tear it in half and undo what it meant. You're a bastard. No, I said calmly. I'm a man you underestimated. For a moment she looked like she wanted to scream, but nothing came. She just stared at the numbers on the page, the balance that wasn't hers anymore, and the quiet man across the kitchen who wasn't chasing her, pleading, or even arguing. I picked up the lemon water I'd been drinking and walked past her. No gloating, no threat, just distance. Behind me, she didn't cry, she didn't rage, she just sat there, facing a truth she never thought she'd have to reckon with. That silence could be sharper than revenge, and paperwork could hurt more than betrayal. The divorce took 19 days, no screaming, no mediation marathons. She didn't contest anything. How could she? Every asset she thought she'd hidden had already been rerouted. Every financial foothold she expected to lean on had been dissolved, documented, or reassigned long before she realized we weren't playing the same game. She signed the final decree in a sterile office with her new attorney, someone too fresh-faced to notice the pit she was already sinking into. No ceremony, no last-minute pleas, just 2 copies, a stapler, and a notary with a tight smile who'd seen this all before. She left without looking back. 1 week later, the envelope arrived at her new apartment, hand-delivered by courier. No return address, just a black seal, and her name in stark serif font, Marina Caldwell. Inside, the letter began with precision. Carla's language was ice over steel. No adjectives, no apologies, just sequence. First, an itemized breakdown of every transfer made in the final 60 days before departure, amounts, timestamps, destination accounts. Second, a notarized copy of the power of attorney clause, signed voluntarily with witness initials and a corresponding video timestamp from my home security system. She hadn't even noticed the little red light was on when she kissed my cheek. Third, a closing summary of the dissolution terms, including the irrevocable nature of the financial instruments she'd attempted to challenge post-filing. And at the bottom, below the legal signature block, a single line handwritten in neat black ink. You did not read. He did. She called me that night. The call rang once. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't try again. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour a drink or text anyone or frame the letter like some victory. I just sat at my desk, opened the fireproof lockbox, and took out my estate plan. I revised 2 sections, executor and contingent beneficiaries. Then I filed it away, logged the update in a private encrypted drive, and locked the box again. There was nothing left to explain, no one to answer to. Yeah, Marina had wanted freedom, wrapped in adventure, powered by assumption. What she got instead was closure by paper, paragraphs and protocols, and a mirror she couldn't look away from. I didn't need her to suffer. That was never the goal. I just needed the facts to be unignorable, and now they were. It sits on the second shelf in my office between a weathered law journal and an old photo of my father. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. A single dollar bill pressed flat behind glass. No engraving, no plaque, just the note sealed in quiet permanence. People ask sometimes, guests, colleagues, a nephew who once tilted his head and said, "That from your first paycheck or something?" I smiled, said nothing, because it's not a story I need to tell. The house is quieter now, not hollow, just clean. Air moves differently when you're not pretending anymore. I drink my coffee at sunrise, go on long walks without checking my phone. The security system was upgraded last month, though no one's ever come knocking. She moved across town. I heard through someone else that she's renting. Furnished. Temporary. I doubt she tells people much about me, or Mark, or the vacation that never happened. There's no elegant way to summarize that kind of lesson. Sometimes I wonder what she sees when she opens her bank app. Whether she still tries the old passwords out of habit, whether her fingers ever hover over my contact before she remembers the silence that followed the last ring. I don't check hers. That part of me, the part that needed to know, left the day I watched her laugh across the garden and slide onto another man's arm like it was always meant to be hers. That man. He vanished just as fast as he arrived, never contacted me, never followed up. He played his part and disappeared before the lights came back on. I imagine he thought the dollar was a joke, a taunt. maybe even a trophy, but it wasn't. It was a transaction, one he never understood the cost of. Every now and then I look at that dollar, usually when I'm pulling a book down or dusting the shelf, and I let my eyes rest on it, not with anger, not with nostalgia, just a quiet, settled knowing. That bill bought her an illusion and bought me a truth. It's the cheapest lesson anyone's ever paid me to learn, and the most expensive one she ever took.